Oi, oi, it's your boy, the old lang syne of taking his damn time. Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast. It's the Slacky Awards for 2025. Coming at you in the first week of 2026. Because when else would you do it? I mean, fights happen right up until New Year's Eve. We just had Rising on New Year's Eve, which was pretty decent. But I think that's something I'll talk about on the boycast, maybe, because, you know, it's nerd shit. If you're here and you're a normal person who's just come through the YouTube feed or whatever, you're probably like, Rising? What the hell is Rising? And it's a Japanese MMA organization that is the offshoot of the offshoot of the offshoot of Pride FC. Because we all secretly wish, actually not even secretly, we all openly wish MMA was still like that. But lots of stuff happened over 2025, even though largely the UFC is doing a terrible job with their product. There are always fun stories, because as long as they're not keeping the fighters from fighting, good shit will happen. So I put out my call. I said, what do you want nominated for the Slacky Awards 2025? And people kindly responded on Twitter and on the Patreon. And if you didn't see, just before I went on my holiday, I published a Advanced Striking 2.0 Roberto Duran on the Patreon. One I've been talking about forever, but is actually part of what I've been working on, because I was like, well, I've got to get something of this out. So I just focused on bridging the gap, how Duran got in against much larger opponents, and how he used his jabbing, even when he wasn't winning the jabbing battle, to win fights. But anyway, yeah, so I got lots of nominations for the Slacky Awards this year. And once again, as always, it is sort of nominations were very heavily biased towards the end of the year. Well, we'll get into it, you know, what they were specifically, but there's stuff that happened in the last sort of 3 weeks of the year tended to dominate people's minds. But going back through the year, loads of crazy stuff happened. I mean, we started the year with Ankalaev beating Pereira, and everyone being like, oh, well, that's the end of the fun. That's it. That's the UFC's only star, and he's now been shown up by a fairly boring but all-around skilled light heavyweight. And then, what was it, 6 months later, Pereira came back and curb stomped him in a way that no one could have possibly expected, at least given the first fight. But anyway, the categories for the Slacky Awards have been in place since 2014, 2015? No, 2014. Actually, I've got it here. Hold on. 2014. The categories are Game Plan of the Year, Technical Turnaround, Most Improved Fighter, Breakout Technique of the Year, and the Buttwire Award for Piss Poor Fight IQ. 4 awards. We used to do Event of the Year, but I couldn't be bothered to do that anymore. That felt like too generic. I've got my 4 things. Let's get into it. We'll start with Game Plan of the Year, because this is a pretty easy one to nail down. When we're talking about breakthrough techniques, we tend to end up very rarely with having a clean winner, or even clean nominees, because the sport changes at such a weird pace. But with the Game Plan of the Year, there is always, in the course of a year, some good fights where someone put on a masterclass specifically catered to that opponent. So we'll go down the noms. Volk versus Lopez, very popular nomination this year, and I have to agree, because Volkanovski, he may have lost a step. I think we were all agreed he's lost a step, but Diego Lopez is athletically, physically, a very tough challenge, and Alexander Volkanovski circled around him and made him look ridiculous. There was always the question of whether Diego Lopez had any footwork, because everyone else on his team doesn't. And it was soundly answered, because Volkanovski circled one way for most of the fight, and Diego Lopez basically couldn't catch up to him. He'd swing round with the turning circle of a barge and get hit in the face, and then Volkanovski would be gone again. And the one time he did catch him, it was more just sort of Volkanovski working himself into bad positioning than Diego Lopez doing anything about it. And they've booked the rematch since, and it's kind of like, has Volkanovski slipped that much? Can Lopez land something even when he's doing everything wrong again and make good on it this time? Or can Lopez, for fuck's sake, learn to cut the ring, mate? But if you didn't read it, there was an article I did after that fight called Alexander Volkanovski's sidestepping system, which was just talking about the L step, the cross step. He was using a lot of different little techniques to step around to his right and then re-engage as Lopez pivoted around his lead foot. Because Lopez never stepped across to confront him. Lopez always turned to face him. Which is one of the big tripping points of cutting the ring anyway. To step across and cut someone off, you make yourself more present. You're there to be hit. You're offering up your center line. You're saying, here I am. I'm trying to smother you, trying to smother your movement, so I have to put myself in the way of it. But on the other hand, if you just turn to face them and stay in your stance, really you're doing a very predictable movement so they can just bounce back in and throw punches at you while you're in that instant on one foot turning round. Very hard to turn and fire quick enough to make good before the guy bounces back in and hits you. Another huge leader this year was Jan versus Merab too, because obviously it just happened and it was very impressive. This is the time where I get to talk about like a thing I've said since whenever I started writing, like 2012. A fight is a strange thing because if you're a football team or whatever, any normal sport, you win or lose and you know you're going to face them again soon. So it's established over time who's the better club. In fighting, you get one chance probably, two chances maybe, three chances if you manage to win one back. You don't get many chances to go at someone. And what's more, you do so few fights in a career compared to like games of every other sport because you're literally losing life. You're losing bits of your body with every camp and every sparring session and every fight. So when two people meet in a professional fight, it's a sum of everything that's going on at that point. So the reason I say that is because Jan versus Merab 2 was a good game plan, well executed. But also, Piotr Jan's own team blamed the first fight on him having a broken right hand. He came out in round one and he landed one really good right hand that got Merab's respect in the second fight. But then Merab, obviously, 4 title fights in 1 year. That's insane. And we just watched Reinier de Ridder come out in his 4th fight of the year and look awful. And you can say, well, Brendan Allen was put on a masterclass. But again, this is the multifaceted thing about fighting. Doing 4 camps in a year is probably not clever. The only person I've seen do it, who have I seen? Inoue did it this year against world-class competitors, which is insane. And he won every single fight. And they were all world title fights. But the only other ones are like Joe Louis against his Bum of the Month club. 4 fights in a year, winning them all at title defense level is insane. So there's that. But in the actual technical aspect of it, you can go back 2 weeks or whatever it was that I did the podcast on this, but beautiful use of the jab, beautiful use of the body jab, body shots as the fight progressed. Anytime he got taken down, he bounced up and put Merab on the single. When he was against the cage, he turned his back, separated the hands, and then gave Merab the single to get him on the single because the single was lower percentage for Merab. When he got the opportunity, he took Merab down because while it is like, I think when people are in the striker versus grappler dynamic, they think, well, if I try and take him down, there's a lot of chance of him turning me around and me ending up on the bottom. Or if I put him on the bottom, he might reverse me. But if you're a good all-round fighter against a really good wrestler, you're probably decent enough that you can make it hard work for them to get from bottom to top. Bottom to top, like sweeping someone or wrestling up into someone and finishing the takedown, is like one of the hardest things to do in fighting. So if you can put the good wrestler on his back, normally you've actually done something really good, while it does feel like you've engaged them in what is their realm. Islam versus JDM was another one for Game Plan of the Year. Obviously, stuffed the octopus stuff from side control that JDM's been doing for years really well against guys like Gilbert Burns and other skilled grapplers. But I was more interested in like how he got him down. And when he came out, JDM came out southpaw. Islam immediately hammered him with 2 low kicks that basically hobbled him for the fight. And Islam Makhachev doesn't throw low kicks. You can go watch his other fights with southpaws. He doesn't throw them. And for this fight, he said, right, I'm going to low kick him right away the moment he goes southpaw. Anytime he switched stances, he shot with a shot that was appropriate to the new stance matchup. He just had a fantastic read on who Jack Della Maddalena was and what his habits were. Gabriel Bonfim versus Randy Brown, I thought was a fantastic one. Basically, he was facing a much longer, rangier opponent, and he pulled out his jab, slid back, and low-kicked him because he knew he would bounce onto the lead foot every time he jabbed. And he really made that work very, very well. And then when Brown held back, he could jump in with his own punches. And when he did that, when he got inside Brown's range, because Brown stopped throwing the jab occasionally because he was getting low kicked, Brown would duck down. And then he nearly hit him with a knee in the first round and an uppercut. And then he hit him later on and knocked him out. And honestly, I was especially blown away because his game plan against Stephen Thompson was so bad. Knowing everything we know about Stephen Thompson, standing out in the open with him and trying to kickbox. And granted, he won the decision, but that was such an unimpressive performance. And then against Randy Brown, he looked like he just studied the tape and had everything about this guy, who is very tricky in his own right. Read him like a book. Ian Gary's on here twice. The Prates one is the one that we're going to focus on, but I really like what he did against Bilal. Obviously, I think he only got the split in that fight, but it works really well as a contrast against this Prates fight because he fights so differently. And that's what this award is about. It's about, sometimes you have fights where a guy comes in, does his usual stuff and dominates. And everyone goes, well, that's game plan of the year. And it's like, is it? Or did his usual game just match up really well with that guy's usual game? With Gary versus Prates, I think Ian Gary's going to be a sort of a fixture in this category for a couple of years now, because he's kind of like a 80 in all stats sort of guy who fights these guys with 90 and 99 in all stats. This is a metaphor I'm only using shortly. I do not believe this shit. I'm not going to give you scores for people, but he's got a guy who's like 80 in all his stats, and he manages to mix it all together so well that he can undo other guys' more specialized games. But the really interesting thing is that he's using his 80 striking against Carlos Prates' 99 striking, and he's winning the striking. For the first 3 rounds, I don't think he gets Prates down, gets him down in the 4th. In the 5th, it was shooting a bad takedown that got Gary on the bottom and started getting him ground and pounded and into trouble. But the threat of the takedown was obviously important. He showed it very early. But the striking, he outstruck probably the scariest striker in the division right now. And what he did was he said, look, you're a southpaw. You've got this long left straight that you can throw from a day's march away. You got a great left knee if I duck down, too obviously. And you got decent left kicks, but if I keep threatening the takedowns, you can't throw the kicks. And then if I throw my right high kick constantly, that's going to keep your left hand at home. And it did, because every exchange, Gary would duck his head out past the lead shoulder and throw up a high kick from really close in. Round 2, I think he dinged him with it. Carlos Prates had to keep his left hand at home. Every single exchange started or ended with Ian Gary throwing his shin up and going, get that hand up, you slag. And it really stopped Prates from what he likes to do. If you watched him against Radke and people like that, his hands are down by his chest. He's reaching out with his lead hand. He's just lining stuff up with no fear of being hit because he's so far away. But because Gary just threw that leg up constantly. Gary's taller than Radke and people like that, but obviously your right leg is one of your longest weapons, because your left foot is already out in front of your stance to begin with, so the pivoting point of it is so far ahead. And by throwing that constantly, he kept that left hand at home, but then he was also throwing the wide right to the head, like an overhand, but very wide round, Puna Soriano style, throwing that to try and clothesline him constantly. Anytime he got to the fence, Prates would try and enter, he'd duck a punch and then throw the overhand and pivot off, slap him offline. He did beautiful work with his jab and his left hook. He basically, by keeping Prates' left hand at home, he said, engage me in the hand fight in the jabbing battle, and Prates couldn't win it. And then he also had good success with a left uppercut, a lead hand uppercut, because every time he started throwing at Prates would go long guard and duck his head down, and it would just hook his head over the top of the path of the uppercut for Gary. So a beautiful performance, obviously a bit let down by the bad takedown attempt in the 5th round, ending him up on the bottom. But it's definitely one of my leaders. I thought it was fantastic. Someone nominated Lerone Murphy versus Pico. I don't think, is that even Lerone Murphy's best performance or best game plan of the year? He took apart Josh Emmett earlier in the year, pretty convincingly, but the Pico, someone said letting Pico get flat-footed in front of him. But Aaron Pico's whole game is 1-2 long left hook to the body, push into the fence, which I love, but it does leave him a little bit open as he does that push in, and he did get, elbowed a couple of times in that fight. JDM versus Bilal got a good number of mentions because it was a very good performance, but it's kind of overshadowed by the fact that JDM then went on to lose to Islam so decisively later in the year. But it was a beautiful performance, up and down, jab and dip, cross and dip, punching straight to the body, hands, head, hips, wasn't just trying to sprawl when Bilal did level change. He had everything in appropriate position that it made it difficult for Bilal to shoot easy takedown or to even, enter on the takedowns. When he was on the fence with his back to the fence, he attacked his own stuff, attempted throws and so on. The moments he got on the bottom, he used his octopus stuff nicely, inverted on a leg at one point. He just looked great in that fight. I think a lot of people think that they have to re-evaluate Jack Della Maddalena off the Islam fight, and I don't think they do. Or like they have to reevaluate that performance like Bilal should have been wrestling non-stop. And I don't think necessarily that would have helped him as much as a lot of people think it did or would. Islam wasn't just going out there. Islam didn't get those takedowns off attempting 100 level changes and doing that. Islam got those takedowns off good striking and then timing the takedown well. I think Bilal was looking for his spots for takedowns, just didn't find them or feel confident going for them. Ank versus Pereira won. I mean, obviously, again, overshadowed by the rematch, but what he did, the hand fighting, we talked about it before the fight, saying, like, it's interesting how that worked very well for Israel Adesanya, and Pereira had trouble with it, and his answer to guys fighting his lead hand was to, like, drop his lead hand and, like, get punched in the face. But he had a lot of trouble with the sort of southpaw dynamic early on, was really struggling to land his low kicks, which is interesting because he landed well in the second fight. And immediately Ankalaev changed stances and got clipped from his worst stance. But it was a pretty good outside striking performance with just classic Big Ank, constantly billed as a wrestler, only does it for one round of the fight when it matters. Even in the fight where it really does matter, he won't go to it for like more than one round. Makes you really grateful for someone like Cain Velasquez, or makes you realize how much of a freak Cain Velasquez was, because he fights like 30 pounds up from what Big Ank does. And he was fighting much bigger men, and he was attempting takedowns constantly and chain wrestling from there. And Big Ank is like superstar wrestler at light heavyweight because he will attempt a takedown in one round. You just don't know which round it will be. So while I just shit-talked that performance, I did think it was impressive. A lot of nominations for Renia Derrida versus Robert Whittaker. I thought that was... it is like how much is game plan and how much is that Renia Derrida has worked out that his weapons are... his weapon is the stepping knee because he's so tall, and it's a good way to enter into the clinch where he can strike from. But it was a really nice... It worked well, a high kick and the stepping knee with the odd jab against a guy who's much faster than him. Fluffy versus Delice was another one that got in. I mean, it was largely the normal Fluffy Hernandez stuff. Take him down, rough him up, force the turtle, rough him up from the turtle, threaten to sit down on the seated katagatame, seated arm triangle, the guillotine with the arm in, the one I mean, and then jump back up and keep kneeing him in the body, punching him in the head if it doesn't work. But there was an added wrinkle that when Delice got his guard back, Fluffy Hernandez just stood up and was like, no, we're not playing guard, mate. Get up and I'll take you down straight into side control again, or force you down into the turtle. It's an interesting thing in modern MMA because, as someone pointed out in their nominations for the Breakout Technique of the Year, guard play is not necessary and often bad to engage in MMA, but you get the odd guy like Roman Delice who would love to just play from the guard. So Fluffy got around it by literally getting around it. If he ended up in front of the guard, he just stood up and said, "Nah, mate, get up." And if he got a takedown, it was normally to a position where he wasn't dealing with the guard. So that's the full nominations there for Game Plan of the Year. Oh, I should tell you who won previously. So we started these awards way back in 2014. The winner of that was John Jones versus Glover Teixeira. Obviously, beautiful infighting along the fence. Roughed him up with elbows and knees, cranked his arm so his right arm didn't work, and generally just battered him. 2015 was Dos Anjos versus Pettis. Fantastic title fight. Again, pressure. 2016 was Garbrandt versus Cruz. One of the most impressive ones of my life, I think, in MMA. Garbrandt never hit those heights again, but if you ever want to show someone like a complete shutout in MMA, just show him that. 2017 was Namajunas versus Jędrzejczyk 1, where that awkward bouncing range fighting really surprised Jędrzejczyk. 2018 was Leon Edwards versus Donald Cerrone, really the coming of the Leon Edwards clinch. 2019, Noah Ward. 2020, Holloway versus Volkanovski 2, which was the one that Max Holloway lost, but I gave him Game Plan of the Year because I was so much impressed by how he'd mitigated the threats from the first fight. 2021 was Ngannou versus Miocic 2, obviously, for changing it all around. 2022 was Keita versus Chikadze. Again, overwhelming pressure, but really just had dealing with a guy who hadn't had much trouble up to that point and making him look like crap. And again, like not winning a single fight since then, really. 2023 was Zhang Weili versus Amanda Lemos, a fight I can't even remember. And 2024 was Piotr Yan versus Davison Figueiredo. Oh, is Piotr Yan on the cusp of a back-to-back win of Game Plan of the Year? And that's actually quite interesting because we were talking about how much is just the usual for, how much is the usual for a fighter. You can't just give them Game Plan of the Year for doing what they usually do so impressively. But if you remember that Piotr Yan versus Figueiredo fight, there's a lot of side kicks to the lead leg to set up that weird cross trip and a lot of body kicks and things. I mean, he did body kick against Morab, but like that's an out in the open kickboxing match with trips. It was always like Sander or Sanshao, that Figueiredo fight. So the Morab one is very different to that. I think for me personally, these are my awards. I want to say all these were really good game plans, but I'm going to give it to Gary versus Pratis. Not only do I think it was just a perfect game plan, but also the two fights that he had this year, he fought completely differently. And I quite like that. I mean, that's what this is about. It's about bringing answers to the opponent and not static problems that they can then study and deal with. Plus, I think that, Piotr Yan is one of the best fighters in the world in any division on skill and natural talent anyway. I think Ian Gary is now performing above what his skill level should be. I think what he's getting now is wins based off good planning as much as his ability. Not to shit on him, I just don't think he's got I would not look at him and say he has as much talent and skill as someone like Piotr Yan in every area of the game. So 2025's Game Plan of the Year, Ian Gary versus Carlos Pratis. Right, I've refilled my tea. Let's get on to the next award. Technical turnaround. This is my baby. As I always say, three of the winners of this, or the first three winners of this, 2014, 2015, 2016, all won belts in the same year later on. So, and then Whittaker won a belt as well. So there's been a few title winners from here, but there's also, there's plenty of non-title winners. This one, I felt like I had a few guys I really was impressed with this year. And again, like with the game plan, you're always sort of trying to weigh up how much is matchups, how much is you going, that guy's really improved X and Y, when X and Y really weren't tested that much by the opponent. And combat sports is full of this. A guy will lose, everyone will go, oh, clearly not as good as we thought he was. Then they'll win another fight, which was in no way stylistically similar to that first fight. And everyone will get back on the hype train. They'll go, well, he just had an off night in the loss. But nominations for this one. Quite a few people said Benoit Saint-Denis. I feel like he's been quietly working his way along this year. Obviously, the derailment he suffered against Dustin Poirier, wouldn't have mattered so much if he didn't then get battered on the ground by Moicano, because the Benoit Saint-Denis promise was that he was an extremely strong grappler who sort of made up for his lack of experience, general experience actually, but mainly on the feet, by being a southpaw and just throwing hard left kicks and left overhands. There was never much depth to that stand-up, but it was enough to really be quite threatening. And by constantly just going forward and trying to overwhelm the opponent, that was how he did his business. But after losing to Moicano in September last year, the year before I suppose now, but 2025, he beat Prepelec in May, Ruffy in September, which really did help his hype, and then knocked out Dariush in November. The Dariush one, you've seen Dariush on the scale. He looks bad. He drains himself so much, and he missed weight for this one. And his chin has always been a bit suspect. So not going to give him a huge technical turnaround bump on just hitting him with the first punch and knocking him out. But the Ruffy fight and the Prepelec fight, Prepelec was kind of a massive step down in competition. So Saint-Denis was expected to win that one. But I was impressed with the slower, more methodical side of him, particularly against Ruffy. He's only 30. There's still years to get better at this. As I always say, even in that division, we had Gaethje, Oliveira, and Poirier all really change who they were late in fighting careers. They learned a load of new stuff and improved. So never say never with him. Some people said Imavov. I think that's just a continuation of what he was already doing well. Cup. I feel like a lot of people, this is not me saying this, this is what I'm hearing. A lot of people think that Cup is probably the biggest beneficiary of the quiet dropping of most drug testing. I think, yeah. And also like this year, his one of his best wins, until the other day actually when he beat Royval, one of his best wins this year was Asu Ambayev, where he cheated his arse off. And then against Bruno Silva, he also cheated his arse off. But, you know, at least he's getting in the cage now. For a lot of Manel Cup's career in the UFC, it's been talking a big game, cancelling a fight, or missing weight. Yeah, clearly one of the best guys in the world. Come a long way since he was fighting like Kai Asakura and Kyoji. I mean, if you watch him against Kyoji, he was not good. He was not very... I mean, he gave Kyoji a decent fight, but it was just the same shit over and over. Now he's actually looking pretty solid. His wrestling's come on in leaps and bounds, and his tits are looking fantastic. Peyton Talbot is a very obvious choice for this. Again, fought in like the last couple of weeks of the year, but even if you didn't have that Henry Cejudo fight, because Henry did look unbelievably washed, but even if you didn't have that Henry Cejudo fight, what Talbot did against Felipe Lima was very, very impressive. Talbot, again, had a loss. Everyone went, oh, get off the hype train. But the loss was to Hanny Barcelos back in January. And between January and June, he seemed to really address sort of the issues with his, maybe not issues with his wrestling, maybe issues with how his game, you know, his striking game integrated with his wrestling and grappling. I do think that there could have been an element of overlooking Hanny Barcelos there, particularly because Barcelos in the UFC had developed into this sort of like awkward counterpuncher. It was sort of easy to forget that this guy was like a 5-time national wrestling champion. And did he win the Pan Ams at some point or something like that? But he's a good wrestler. And those accomplishments are at the sort of level where you could ignore that. Like, if you're fighting Henry Cejudo, you go, well, Henry Cejudo, famous gold medalist Olympian. If you're fighting Hanny Barcelos, you go, well, Brazilian national champion 5 times, what is that? But clearly his wrestling worked well, and he was able to hold Talbot down for long periods too. But Talbot against Lima not only looked better at stopping the takedowns and wrestling on his own terms, he was getting up well from underneath a very highly touted grappling prospect, or grappling-based prospect. Like, Felipe Lima is more likely to submit you than Hanny Barcelos, probably. But then the win over Henry Cejudo is again... I think that is more to do with him just beating up Henry Cejudo on the feet, and also just the height difference was so significant. People went mad about him hitting Henry Cejudo's own trip on Henry Cejudo, but again, he blasted him in the head for 4 minutes first. You know, I think the Felipe Lima one impresses me much more with how his grappling's coming along. I know he's working with the Ruotolos, so he's going to be dealing with heavy top game most days of his life. Some people asking for Fluffy Hernandez. I think that's an ongoing sort of... Well, I think he just had a stumble against Kevin Holland. You know, that was a very early knockout. Hernandez, if there's a mark on his career, it's that in the first round, he takes a little while to warm up. He's one of those guys who comes out and his reactions aren't there. You saw it against Michel Pereira. Who else hit him? Was Shabazian hurt him in the first round? A couple of guys have hurt him in the first round. And Holland just did him in 40 seconds. I think if that fight happened now, I would favour Hernandez, obviously. But if that fight happened again, like 3 months after that first one, I think Fluffy Hernandez's wrestling is still a horrible matchup for Kevin Holland. And I do think that first round sort of vulnerability is still there. You still see it from time to time in his fights. So I think he's just a constant... I think he's gradually improving, but I don't think he was ever like broken and then fixed it. Couple of recommendations for Fares Ziam, who's on an incredible run right now. It's crazy to think back that this guy, he came to the UFC, and in his UFC debut, he lost to Don Madge, who then disappeared, but then got finished by Terence McKinney in 1 round. You know, to be Terence McKinney fodder and then become... I think he should probably... Is he ranked now? He should be ranked. Yes, he's number 15, which is the lowest they could possibly rank him and still rank him. But 6-fight winning streak... Hasn't lost in 3 and a bit years. Looking great. Striking looks serviceable. Wrestling looks tremendous. If you watch his single leg where he pulls people off the fence and like hoists them in the air, I said it was like someone getting caught in a snare trap in a cartoon. He gets the leg, he puts his Habib will get the hands locked under the crotch, step to the middle, and then swing the guy over it like he would for a power twist. Ziam steps the other foot in the middle, wedges his knee against the fence, and like pulls the guy's leg up in the air and just drags them off their feet. It's crazy. He's a 6'1" lightweight, so he towers over most of the people he fights. Yeah, I'm gonna have to restudy his losses in the UFC. I'm gonna have to rewatch his UFC career. I've only been watching like his recent ones. When he's got a fight coming up, I watch like what he's been up to lately. But he does seem to have turned his career around quite a bit. Steve Garcia is another one, currently on the run of his life. Really sad that he ended up headlining that fight night card no one gave a shit about. Because he was on a 6-fight win streak and he'd finished 5 of them. Beat the piss out of the ghost of Calvin Kattar in July, and then stopped Onama in November. Honestly, that Onama fight is crazy because that was the card where Isaac Dalgarian got caught doing nefarious gambling things. If David Onama didn't have a reputation for being slow off the mark in round 1, I think people would be looking at him the same way because he is also an ex-Kraus guy and he did nothing in that Garcia fight. Garcia just overwhelmed him. But, you know, you go back to like 2020 and Steve Garcia was losing to like Violent Bob Ross, Luis Pena, and Mahashate, who's kind of mid. I think he might have been helped along by the fact that he's gone back to featherweight. You know, he went all the way up to lightweight. He was at bantamweight at one point, but he went all the way up to lightweight, which is probably less work on him before the fight, as in like hardship. But at featherweight, he's just enormous, powerful, got a good gas tank, and has the very sort of like Mike Winklejohn coded striking, or Brandon Six Gun Gibson. You know, it's just low kicks, oblique kicks, flappy hands. It's something like he's clearly very different to someone like Carlos Condit, but you do see a little bit of that stuff in him. Some people nominated Batista. I think that's more a reflection of public perception. He's been great for a while. And then he had a boring fight with Jose Aldo, and people decided that he was like hype train derailed, even though he won. And then he had a good fight losing against Umar, and people decided he's good again. But he's always been good. Sorry, Batista, I love you, but you're not getting this award. Waldo Cortez Acosta. Oh, this one's going to hurt if I have to give it to him. Though he does seem to have realized now, when you look at heavyweight, there are guys who have actual talent. And there are guys who are just big dudes who fight. Waldo Cortez Acosta, you can watch him and go, that's actually quite a talented guy. But for a long time, his talent was out jabbing the other guy, not being hurt by anything that you hit him with, winning in a boring way, and also mean mugging in a way, like acting in the fight very obviously as if he was doing much more than he was. And then he had this fight with Sergey Pavlovich and he lost. And it seemed to have been like a freeing experience for him. Because he took Sergey Pavlovich's best punches and didn't care. And now he's fighting like, I can just swing. So he knocked out Ante Dalia and Shamil Gaziev in the space of 3 weeks. It's been really crazy. I mean, if he keeps that up, I'm all for it. But again, revisionism on this, because like, after he knocked out Gaziev, some guy went viral on Twitter being like, yeah, you can tell he played baseball because look, he just swings these right hands. And they're clips from, I believe, his fight with Bresky in 2023. And Bresky is chinny and bad at fighting. And it's the only other finish on Waldo Cortez Acosta's UFC record. Like, he is not a finisher and he very rarely throws hard until his last 2 fights. But then I would hate to see him lose the jab because like that is something that it should be used to land those bombs. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I don't think it has to be, I'm going to back onto the fence and throw my right hand when they swing on me. But anyway, Chris Duncan was another one mentioned. Obviously looking fantastic. Come a long way from losing to Borshev on the Contender Series. Fucking Borshev. Imagine losing to Borshev. But on a 4-fight winning streak now, if you watched his... just submitted Terence McKinney in a very McKinney-like fight. I felt like that fight was a step backwards for him because he should have been fighting someone ranked off the Rebecki fight. But he's looked fantastic in his last 4. Always a strong submission threat, but really his striking is improving enormously. Who else we got? Natalia Silva. I think she's just doing more of the same. Ian Gary. I don't know if you can call it improvement when he's sort of like winning by game plans. Volkan Ozdemir. I had him down a couple of years ago. Someone said for finally throwing combinations. And I had him down a couple of years ago because in that fight against Ilir Latifi, he finally looked like he had it all together. Combinations, counter knees on the level change, wrestling brilliantly. And then he just lost it again. So, he's always had it when he's on. And then someone said Mackenzie Dern, and I kind of begrudgingly say, yeah, maybe she's improved, but man, that fight was bad. And then Melky Costa, I don't know if I've mentioned him, but he's looking fantastic right now. Melky Costa is another one who came into the UFC at short notice, a weight class up, kind of like Benoit Saint-Denis. I mean, loads of guys do this now. They always say like, oh, you've got to come through the Contender Series or hope on a last-minute replacement. Get the last-minute replacement. Don't wait on the Contender Series and sign on a contract where you're like getting 10 and 10. Come in at the last minute, bang through those fights quickly. Hope you do well. But Melky Costa came in against Thiago Moises, who was an established lightweight. Lost by René Kachuk in round 2. Looked all right against Austin Lingo. Lost to Steve Garcia relatively quickly. Now on a 5-fight run at featherweight, looking fantastic. Brilliant body kicking, distance management. Just like the South, everything you want to see from a good measured southpaw. Lovely body and high kick, double attack, good left straight. I mean, he just knocked out Morgan Charrier with a high kick. So Charrier, very good kickboxer in an MMA context. Struggled with Nathaniel Wood, but didn't get knocked out by Nathaniel Wood. I mean, that tells you that Costa is proving tricky. Stopped Andre Fili back in February. In fact, he's done 4 fights in the space of 2025, and he won all of them. So he's really looking phenomenal. And this is one of those ones where I'm like, I don't think he's going to win a title. I don't think Melky Costa has that in him. But if you take the guy who I was watching against, like Thiago Moises on short notice, I couldn't have imagined him beating guys like Julian Erosa, Christian Rodriguez, Morgan Charrier. So it's between Talbot and Costa for me. And I think Talbot's thing was a sort of stumble in the middle of clearly being a very excellent talent who's going to develop into probably something more. I think Melky Costa's really has been a career turnaround. And he's doing it through like technically kickboxing people a lot of the time, which is very impressive. Oh, I'll do the 2014 TJ Dillashaw, 2015 Rose Namajunas, 2016 Max Holloway, 2017 Robert Whittaker, 2018 three-way tie Poirier Cejudo Blachowicz, 2019 Justin Gaethje, 2020 Charles Oliveira, 2021 Brandon Moreno, 2022 Nathaniel Wood, 2023 Khalil Roundtree, 2024 Chase Hooper. God, I gave it to Chase Hooper. 2025 Melky Costa, technical turnaround of the year. So now we get to get a bit more head up own arse. Technique talky. Get to talk about some of the trends going on in mixed martial arts as we get to the breakout technique of the year. Had a couple of funny suggestions for this one. Someone said releasing medical records to prove you were actually fouled. Few people nominated shooting constantly and doing fuck all damage, which I think I've spoken about plenty of times this year. Awful lot of activity that isn't really doing anything. Awful lot of making the fight not happen. Few people nominated ground and pound in 2025 because it was revolutionary to actually strike from top position. Arman Sarukian striking from top position. No one else, really. Oh, Macy Barber a little bit, but in terms of real nominations, William from Open Note Grappling mentioned wall waza, as in wrestling on the wall. I mean, obviously going to always be important, wall wrestling, but last year I awarded it to Whizzer Throws Off the Cage because they were finally catching on after about 3 years of talking about them. The key on that was that Islam Makhachev was using them, and you knew, like way back in the day, you knew that he was being held against the fence by Khabib Nurmagomedov every day in training. So if he's going for them, they probably work. And as you saw, like Jack Della Maddalena attempted one against Islam Makhachev, made a ton of space, didn't quite get out in time, but that's exactly what they do. They force the guy to you either throw him and get a really good position, or they force him to let go of you and give you space to run away or start wrestling back into him. But William from Open Note Grappling is really into the Sasai Surikomiyashi off knees at the moment. I mean, these have been around for a while. I think, did Valentina Shevchenko hit one on Juliana Pena? But the Sasai Surikomiyashi is putting your foot basically on their shin or ankle or wherever it is as you pull them off balance in that direction and stop them from stepping. It's a really cool throw. If you hit it from the over-under clinch, you can land straight into side control. Matt Brown used to hit it all the time. But by waiting for the guy to throw a knee and then hitting it on his other leg, you pretty much guarantee that you've got a good shot at getting him over. Someone said the crab ride, but I think it's still only Pantoja doing it. Heavyweight heel hooks, again, I mean, that's only, what's his name? Volta Walker. Unks on TRT. Yeah, it seems like we can get away with stuff like that again. In terms of real suggestions, the spinning elbow is probably going to win this, I'm just going to say, because it has been an absolutely crazy year for spinning elbows. And you could extend that even to back fists with Kevin Velajos knocking out Giga Chikadze the other day, which I don't think I talked about on the podcast yet. But I really liked that because it was happening as he was circling around and he stepped. Chikadze was exiting to Velajos's right. So Velajos stepped his right foot up to level and then spun around that to do the back fist, which made a ton of distance. I mean, he wouldn't have hit him with maybe a shifting right hook he could have hit him with, but still would have been lacking for length. Whereas if you step and then spin, you get a ton of distance on that. Reminded me of the one that Sergio Pettis hit Kyoji Horiguchi with on the exit. But the spinning elbow is having a bumper year, or was having a bumper year in 2025. Kaposa, Grabaka Hitman on Twitter, had a huge thread of them happening basically all over the world. It wasn't even just the UFC, it was happening everywhere. And I think part of it is people seeing it, you know, like the Max Holloway point at the ground thing, which really, it was starting to annoy me how many people were doing that because they weren't Max Holloway, and people would do it when they weren't winning too. Like the whole thing is that Max Holloway does it when he's winning and still threatens to give up the whole fight by letting you knock him out, which is the crazy part. But guys are losing the whole fight and then going, come on, swag and bang in the middle. It's like, no, why would they? But because that became a viral moment, the Holloway Gaethje one, everyone started doing it. I think a lot of things in fighting catch on more due to viral Instagram moments and shit than due to coaches going, damn, that's changing fights, that technique. Because everyone started trying spinning elbows and they're working quite well. But this gives us a chance to talk about like how to land a spinning elbow. Spinning techniques generally, and elbows generally. Elbows generally, you are at a horrible disadvantage on reach. So diving after them, not always the best idea. But spinning techniques, your best time to land them are when the opponent cannot retreat and when the opponent is definitely stepping into you. Because all these techniques go horribly wrong if you spin and they back up just enough that you fall short, or they time a good step down the blind side. But that takes real preparation to do. That's like TJ Dillashaw versus Renan Barão. You know it's coming, so step down the blind side, crack them while they're out of position. Doesn't take any preparation to step back, which is what everyone in MMA does about everything. If you don't know if you're not sure what's coming at you, just step back. So the time to do it is when they're at the fence or when they're definitely attacking you. So you've seen a few landed on the counter. I think John Silva was running onto Diego Lopez when he spun for one, but you'll also see them when guys are circling along the cage. Elbows are a little bit trickier to do along the cage when the guy's circling on the cage. That's more of a back fist, back kick, wheel kick sort of situation, just for the length. But along the fence, there's this additional one where if you press someone into the fence with an underhook, and you or two underhooks, and you pummel your hands to the inside, you can free your hands while leaning your head on them, and then they will start circling. And you can spin fast enough to either crack them before they circle off away from the elbow, or they're going to circle into the elbow and really do themselves some harm. So that was how John Jones used to land his back elbow back in the day, in his earliest UFC uses of it. Alexander Volkanovski did it to that lad who went to Bellator, Jeremy something or other, Kennedy, and Mizuto Hirota. And you'll see guys doing it. If you see someone in the clinch along the cage, with the opponent's back to the cage, and they start shortening their arms and posting their head against the guy, good chance they're going to spin. If not, they're going to free their arms and hit the body, which would be very smart, but no one does. And then on the counter is the best time to land the back elbow, and always has been in Muay Thai. That's the time guys look for it. Get the guy coming forward, spin, hit him with the back elbow. The danger of that in MMA has always been that in Muay Thai, you hit the guy with the back elbow, he ends up behind you. You might have knocked him out, you might have cut him. The referee breaks you, you start again. In MMA, you spin for the back elbow, you smash him in the face as hard as you can. You cut him wide open, but he's now on your back, which is really, really bad in MMA. I think a large part of people being more confident with this is being more confident giving up your back on the feet. because people are getting better at breaking the hands apart and turning back into people. If you watch Tony Ferguson versus Donald Cerrone from a few years ago, it's that Tony Ferguson's like last legit win in MMA. But it's sad to watch because Tony was obviously slowing down. You can watch it compared to like the Barboza fight and you're like, oh my God, this guy, he's losing it. But he hits Donald Cerrone with a load of back elbows. And every time he does, Donald Cerrone goes straight for his waist. So Tony hits him with the back elbow and his hands immediately go to where he expects Donald Cerrone's hands to be. And he turns back with his head into Donald Cerrone. So he executes this beautiful striking technique and immediately goes into wrestling mode to break free and then back into striking mode. And if you can do that comfortably, it makes the back elbow much more viable. If you're just spinning like a loon, great example, Dong Hyun Kim back in the day, stun gun. He used to find one crazy technique and then just hammer it into the ground. So one fight, he decided he wanted to do a bicycle kick, lift one leg, jump, kick with the other. And he did about 50 in this one fight until he finally got the guy out of there. Then he back elbowed John Hathaway. So he came into his fight with Tyron Woodley and he was like, the back elbow is all I'm doing. It's unbelievable if you watch it. It's just so stupid to do this one thing over and over again. And I think Woodley times him with an overhand and it hits him like in the back of the head. He just goes down like a sack of shit. But that's the danger if you just get too into spinning things. Ricardo Ramos has 3 or 2 spinning back elbow knockouts in the UFC, but he times them pretty well generally, but he gets way too into it. It's a thing where even if you've got the guy coming forwards, you're still only going to get him dead to rights sometimes. You've got to have times he's coming in where you're not trying to back elbow him, and Ricardo Ramos really is guilty of like looking for it all the time. But I love seeing it. I think it's fantastic that guys are using it so regularly now. Other nominations, straights to the body against wrestlers. We had a few of these this year, most notably Paul Hughes and Jack Della Maddalena. I did a Filthy Casuals guide on it. And naturally, after Jack Della Maddalena lost or Paul Hughes lost or whatever, people turn up and they go, ha, how well did that work? And it's like, no, you moron. I'm looking at a specific technique and the time you use it. If you throw a back elbow at the wrong time, you're in trouble. The point of the body punching against wrestlers is that if you level change and jab the body, or you level change and throw the right straight to the body, or the uppercut to the body is nice too, you're putting an obstruction in the way of the guy timing a level change as you punch. If you come out and throw punches straight for his head and he ducks under, you are completely open. He's beaten head, hands, and he's on your hips. And that's where you see guys going like, oh, sprawl as hard as you can. And sprawling is just not the best answer for anything. It's like the last answer. You watch guys like Dominic Cruz, who you go like, how come no one's ever taken him down? It's not because his sprawl's so good. It's because he's really hard to even get a hold of in the first place. But there's obviously holes to just punching the body. What I like about the body straights against wrestlers is that it's a technique where you know in that instant he can't time the double leg underneath it. So that should be something you use to break up your offense so that he's not always just level changing under your punches. It's like how throwing the knee occasionally stops him from ducking in as readily, or if an opponent's ducking defensively, you throw a knee a couple of times, they're not going to use their head like that for maybe a few more exchanges until they forget about it or they feel a little bit more confident and go back to it. But if you watch the rematch between Hughes and Usman, every time he throws the right straight to the body, he lands and Usman can't get under it. It's that Usman's waiting for the left hook to come up to the head afterwards and then he ducks under that. And that's where you can see, if you swing for someone's head and they level change under it, you're in danger. If you swing for someone's body and they level change, you're not really in danger. So body punching as point scorers versus wrestlers, or even entering techniques against wrestlers, slowly starting to break through. The more I talk about it, the more hopefully people will start doing it. Had some suggestions for the Yoza kick. It's still not catching on in a big way in MMA. There was someone doing it someone was doing it to Jose Shorty Torres at Rising the other day on New Year's Eve. Yoza kick is kicking the back leg with a front kick with the ball of the foot. Sadiq Yusuf did it to Edson Barboza a load of times in 2023. People watched that. People watched it work. People watched it stop Barboza from low kicking him, and they ignored it. But Yuki Yoza himself, he just beat the piss out of Superlek this year, a couple of months ago. But that's kickboxing. I want to talk about it, but that's a different sport. We're talking about MMA today. Someone suggested inside ankle kick, which is something Yotin's been doing in Muay Thai. I would love that to catch on in MMA. Inside ankle kick is quite interesting because like they call it the shin kick. When you're watching the fight, it looks like the shin kick. And then Yotin went to train with, he did a seminar at Liam Harrison's. And Liam Harrison said he was he was suspicious of the shin kick being legitimate because he's been checking things on his shins his entire career. And he asked Yotin to do it. And apparently Yotin kicks basically the inside of the ankle just above that. And it canes. So if you watch Yotin's last fight, he fights a southpaw and he keeps pump faking his right kick so the guy picks his leg up. And then as that leg's coming down, he releases it and kicks the ankle. Or just above it on the inside. But then just, was it last week, couple of weeks ago? Tawanchai, an amazing Nak Muay. He's the is he the current 4-ounce Muay Thai champion in one? But he was their Muay Thai champion in 4-ounce gloves. He beat up Superbon, their current kickboxing champion. He's very, very good. And I want to say random Chinese lad, I can't even remember his name, came out, threw a hard kick to the inside of the shin and Tawanchai's leg gave out. When I say the inside of the shin, I'm not like talking about the shin. I'm talking about go 90 degrees round from it to the inside. Kicked him there and his leg just buckled. I mean, 2 years ago, I gave this award to the Pereira kick, that upward slanting thing he does where he doesn't turn his hips over and he kicks the outside of the calf. So, yeah, people still haven't discovered the joy of that. There's no one else doing it the same way as him. But I'd love the inside ankle kick to catch on. The thing with the inside ankle kick and the Yoza kick, they are sort of more close-range kicks. It's kicking it's like the infighting of kicking, which is a little bit more dangerous in MMA because everyone wants to pick up your legs anytime you kick. In MMA, if you're kicking, it's like do it from long range and kick long. Someone said elbowing the forearms from Jan versus Merab. Yeah, I was talking about that the other week. When Jan turned his back to get the back body lock and start separating the hands, as I'm always talking about, Corey Sandhagen's brilliant at this. He did this a lot against Umar and Merab Dvalishvili. But Jan was clearly like, they're not separating quick enough. So he just started elbowing him in the wrist. And it looked really painful. I was sitting here at my desk trying to elbow my own wrist and going, oh, that's quite nasty, actually. And someone said Fluffy Hernandez is a seated triangle. I mean, he's had a ton of success with it, but so did Jack Hermansson like 5 years ago. He submitted, I think, 2 or 3 guys in a row with it. There's always going to be someone out there doing it well. But I think the thing about Fluffy is that he's not just trying to submit people with it like Hernandez and go straight to his back. He does it because he can do it, sort of sit to a hip, and then come back up when it doesn't. If he doesn't get the bite, he comes back up and starts beating you up from the back of the turtle again. He sits down on the choke, but he never pulls guard. Never jumps the ghillie. So, previous winners. 2014, electric chair sweep. That was a weird year. 2015, snap kicks to the body. Glad to say they're everywhere now. 2016, Imanari roll. Still not everywhere. Oh, by the way, Ryan Hall's new Outside Funk. Fantastic stuff. If you want to see that, well, firstly, check out his instructional. But if you want to see that in action, Carlos Vera did that this year to Rinya Nakamura and whoever the guy he beat was. 2017, front headlock fluidity. Das Anaconda go behinds. That was the peak of like Tony Ferguson and Brian Ortega. 2018, Suloev stretch because we had 2 in one night and then never saw him again. 2019, no award. 2020, the Poirier shift. Fantastic technique. Go and read Advanced Striking 2.0 Dustin Poirier to learn more about that. 2021, low singles and buggy chokes because it was a bullshit year. 2022, ninja choke because there were a couple of big ones. I mean, Jean Silva just got Bryce Mitchell with the ninja choke. Was that last year? Or 2024? 2023, the Pereira kick. 2024, Whizzer throws off the cage. 2025, the spinning back elbow. People are starting to learn when to do it and not just how to do it. And they're also learning how to get out of it after you hit it or fuck it up. Right, last award of the year. One of my favourites. Always a good laugh with people's nominations for this one. The Buttwire Award for piss poor fight IQ. Number 1 nomination by almost everyone. Isaac Delgarian. A game plan so bad, he might go to prison. I don't know if I have to explain this to anyone, but it did happen on like the least watched card of the year, and they've been done quite well at sort of keeping it quiet. In the same way that I'm always on about how James Krause got caught doing a betting scandal. They made him disband his gym. All those fighters are now other places, including Delgarian. And he's not in jail. He's not had charges brought against him publicly. And it could be because they're like assembling an airtight case or whatever. But my suspicion has always been that it's quite hard to prove because gambling now is so permissive on all the things you can bet on, like all the tiny minutiae of it. And they probably don't want tons of attention drawn to it. Either the UFC or their new partner Polymarket or the bookies who basically run this sport. But Isaac Delgarian came out, shot the world's worst takedown, went down into the turtle and the guy ran to his back as he will. And then he barely fought the hands and he got rear naked choked. Now, it was because it was so egregious and it was because Daniel Cormier was actually awake enough to care and kept pointing it out that people noticed. I think that could have gone off and people would have talked about it being fake, but it wouldn't have become nearly as big a thing if DC hadn't said it on commentary, how bad it was. But thinking back, I can't think of specific names off the top of my head, but you have seen plenty of fights where a guy has quite quickly, maybe a little bit of bullshit striking to start with, changed level, attempted the takedown, got sprawled on hard, and then the guy's run to his back. And maybe he's got choked, maybe he's got pounded out or whatever. I mean, choke's the most reliable way to lose, but you can think of instances where that's happened. Guys have shot a bad takedown and ended up with the guy on their back almost immediately. Of all the ways to fake losing a fight, or to lose a fight on purpose, I think that's probably the easiest. In boxing, you can get hit with something and you've really got to stand there and make sure it's serious before you fall down, because otherwise you get people pulling up the replay and going, that didn't touch him, that barely brushed him. If the intention, if, this is all alleged, if that fight was fixed and Delgarian was taking a dive, I feel like he should have swung for a bit first and just let the guy hit him with something, because then at least you could be like, oh, he must have got hit cleaner than I thought in that exchange, and that's why he's diving on a bad shot. Or maybe he turned his ankle in that exchange, he's diving on a bad shot. There's a lot of room for benefit of the doubt in MMA. It's just because it was so flagrantly bad, and it doesn't help that Delgarian was a good fighter. Like, he was a fighter with a lot of promise who had one loss on his record. He came in quite highly touted, and people watched him and said he's a pretty good fighter. So the fact that then he comes out and he fights really sloppily, makes you question it. Anyway, can't. Well, maybe I can give it to him. I suppose I could. A lot of nominations for Merab and Renia Derrida for fighting 4 times in a year and then looking bad in their last one. Someone said Adesanya for refusing a timeout after getting an eye poked. Yeah, he came back in quite quickly against Imavov and got knocked out. Oh, Virna Jandiroba for getting takedowns and then getting outstruck from the bottom. I don't know if that's bad fight IQ or just being a bad fighter. That was stunning. She had the wrestling. Mackenzie Dern couldn't take her down, so she'd get the takedown and then she'd sit on top doing nothing, not even like grinding her way in closed guard. And Mackenzie Dern's throwing up crappy hammer fists from the bottom and outlanding her, and Jandiroba's like, oh, I don't like that, and stands up. It's like, bro, what are you doing? You could either do like the Fedor Nog 3, which is where you strike into a takedown, you throw them to the mat, like slam them down, jump up and be like, get up. And look like, you are dominating the fight, but you're not actually engaging in the area where you can get hurt. But you have to have crazy good cardio to do that. Or you can just try and hunker down. Like, Mackenzie Dern, she's got a couple of submissions on her record, but her guard is not so dangerous that a good fighter shouldn't be able to, like, bury their head in her chest, keep their hands on the bicep ties, and then, you don't even have to come up and elbow her. Just grind in until the referee stands you up. To be getting beat up from someone's guard in big 2025, bugger my arse. Someone said DDP versus Chimaev. I'd love to give this to Chimaev for not throwing any fucking strikes, but, maybe his team bet on him winning by decision. Maybe they were like, DDP's a huge explosive dude, because he does do weird get-ups and things like that empty half thing he did against Brunson, where he basically bench pressed him to guard. But to be on the bottom and hug the guy instead of doing anything else, because the only way you're getting up from the bottom, whether you're turning away or turning in, is getting your elbow underneath you. If your elbows are both lifted off the mat, as when you're hugging someone, you're not getting up. You're not getting to the turtle. It's not happening. So to spend the whole fight there just sort of holding on and then getting put in the crucifix as a result, because all he has to do is sort of like turn his hips so that he's in scarf hold sort of direction, and then push his knee over the top of your arm, which is already hugging him. Zabit used to do that a lot. He'd get mount and then the guy would grab him around the waist. He'd dismount into knee on belly and then put his other knee over their bicep and get the crucifix. Someone said the multiple people that lost to Neil Magny after throwing less than 50 leg kicks. Or Jailton, lots of nominations for Jailton Almeida. Gets top position on Volkov, does nothing. I mean, it's his own fault because he has been winning these fights without doing any ground and pound. He fought Derek Lewis and threw nothing from top position for 25 minutes. And we all said, that's fucking stupid. Do some damage. And he finally lost a fight by decision for not doing any damage. Was that the same card where they gave Umar the decision for not doing any damage, though? Because, it is still a mixed bag what the judges care about. Someone suggested Pooja Tomar, who's the lass who fought Shauna Bannon, knocked her down, got in an armbar, almost got out, and then put herself back in it. And Bannon finished that armbar. I mean, getting finished by Shauna Bannon. That's crazy. Couple of nominations for Bonfim versus Wonderboy, which I fully agree with. That was mad. Just watch a guy, definition of madness or whatever. If you watched a load of dudes just run after Wonderboy and not catch him, or stand in the middle of the ring with him and just lose striking exchanges, why are you going to then do the same thing? Try and move him towards the cage. Kick his legs as he's circling out. Like there are a few things that work really well against Wonderboy that work like consistently for multiple different types of fighters. Most of them come off pressuring him towards the cage and not just like running after him out in the open or standing in the middle. Like I can sort of forgive running after him like Buckley did, because Buckley even beat him by running after him and eventually catching him. Because Wonderboy's feet have slowed down so much. Like he would never get caught before against the fence. Like if you watch him against Rob Whittaker, doesn't take a second to get off the fence. As soon as he feels it near him, he goes, whoop, I'm out the side door. Buckley, he's like, oh dear. And also with the recent Wonderboy, he's sitting down on these backward moving counters because he's decided, like late stage Muhammad Ali, he's like, I'm an old man, I better start cracking people. Last thing to go. But his feet are much slower. But anyway, Bonfim's standing out in the open and just letting him do Wonderboy things, and he just about won the decision. But, he did look much better against Randy Brown, but I just can't believe, with all the footage available of Wonderboy, the plan you'd use would be to have a clean kickboxing contest with him where you barely outland him. Lots of nominations for Leon versus Pratis and Brady, because against Brady, he lost 2 rounds on the ground and then tried to take him down in round 3 and ended up getting mogged. And then against Pratis, he got him down successfully, demonstrated that he was pretty good grappling with him or wrestling with him, and then stood back and struck. With Pratis, that's just how a fight goes. There are going to be moments where you need to stand on the feet. You can't just dive for the guy's hips over and over. With Brady, it is a little bit like trying and wrestle the wrestler a little bit to put the fear of God into him, but it was getting back, willingly putting yourself in the area of the fight where he would have to work to get to it before. As we've seen from Sean Brady, his striking is bad. If you force him to stay in that realm for a little while, he's really not very impressive on the feet. Not very comfortable. Someone said Michel Pereira's plan against Abus Magomedov. I mean, he fought twice last year and he looked crap in both, but he got knocked out quickly by Kyle Dawkins. He's looked bad in every fight that goes past the first round. But to get out cardioed by Abus Magomedov is very, very funny. To get out cardioed by Abus Magomedov is like getting out jabbed by a midget. It's pretty impressive. Someone said when Joshua Homburg switched places with his tattooed twin in a German MMA tournament final. What? Oh, wow. Yes, in March, he was disqualified for switching places with his brother. Phenomenal. Okay, so it's a tournament. Joshua Homburg wins the semi-final in a grueling 3-round affair. His twin brother, Jeremias, goes into the final and wins it. People notice that he's got a tattoo between the semi-final and the final. Oh, I love MMA for just these stupid, stupid things that happen like this. A lot of nominations for Buckley versus Usman, just for not fighting any differently against a guy who there's loads of footage of and running and swinging. But I think Buckley was high on his own supply. He was high on the smell of his own farts. He'd been knocking out Unks in his last 4, 5, whatever it was, by swinging wild. And I remember earlier this year I pointed out that his connecting percentage is like 30%, and everyone else in the top 15 is like 45. I think it might even be like 29% his connect percentage. He is a horribly inaccurate fighter. And he's basically been getting by on the fact that he's a big, he's an athlete in his prime, fighting washed welterweights. And he fought Usman, who is probably washed, but still much better than him, and looks terrible. Oh, harsh. People nominating Pantoja for falling on his, for the way that he posted his arm as he went down. I can never do that. Like, even when Hirohito Yoshida, the legend in both MMA and judo, he famously snapped his arm like a toothpick in judo, getting shoulder thrown and putting his hand down, which is like day one. Don't do that in judo. If you're being thrown with your weight and the opponent's weight falling on top of it, don't put your arm out. But equally, you're trying to win. And if you come from a wrestling background, go watch wrestling. Nobody's fucking break falling there. Hands on the mat all the time. Watch the Iranians. They get their underhook and they push the guy and hope he goes for an Uchimata, and they immediately slam their other hand into the mat in the way that you're absolutely not supposed to do. Oh, someone said Brian Ortega for that whole debacle. I feel like that sort of just got forgotten. Against Aljo back in August. There's reports that there's ambulances at the hotel. I think Marab said there were ambulances at the hotel. Brian Ortega weighs in at 153 for a 145 fight. And they all just let it go ahead. And then it was revealed he had a seizure or something like that before then. He proceeds to have the worst fight of his life, getting out. He made Aljamain Sterling look like Pernell Whitaker. It was crazy. And then afterwards it was he blacked out in the hotel and stuff. And it's well, then stop the fucking fight. At some point in the lead up to the fight, they knew he was almost 10 pounds over the weight he was supposed to be coming in at. And they made the catch weight decision a day before. But then I think him fighting is just, he shouldn't be doing that anymore. Go and do Polaris events, just grapple. So who wins? Well, let's run down the winners previously. 2014, Ali Bagautinov immediately standing with his back to the fence at all times against Demetrius Johnson. 2015, Tim Boeich running at Dan Henderson. 2016, Ryan Bader diving low on Rumble's leg and getting pounded out. 2017, Rumble versus DC. If you know, you know. 2018, Cody Garbrandt. No further mention, just Cody Garbrandt. 2019, no award. 2020, Matt Wyman jumps guard on Jordan Levitt and immediately gets slammed into unconsciousness. 2021, Sylvester Miller headbutts Jack Cartwright a dozen times before getting disqualified. 2022, Sean Strickland goes out against the best left hooker in the game, Alex Pereira, and immediately starts reaching while standing on one leg. 2023, Ji-Yun Kim versus Mandy Bohm, a fantastic one. Go listen to that episode. 2024, Yuri Prochaska versus Alex Pereira 2, gets low kicked to death in the first fight, gets low kicked to death by Alexander Rakic, comes into the second fight with Alex Pereira, does not attempt to deal with the low kicks. And 2025, the But-Why winner for Piss 4 Fight IQ, it's got to be Dolgarian. If that's the case, either that was the dumbest performance of his career, if it wasn't sketchy, way below what he's capable of, just shooting and going straight down onto his belly, or it was the worst attempt to throw a fight I've ever seen, man. Just put some craft into it. It's like when people were talking about Anderson Silva versus Chris Weidman 1. There was a round table on ESPN about it. Was it ESPN or Sports Illustrated? But they did a round table where they speculated over whether it was a dive. And about 2 minutes in, they all agree, I didn't watch it, I just read the newspapers, but that's sketchy that he was such a favorite and he lost like that. But my takeaway was I think he'd just done his first appearance in a film in Brazil. I was like, well, if that's how he acts, he's going to be on the Oscar trail in no time at all. But Dolgarian not only blows his own career, apparently a load more fights are under investigation now. The way that the fighters were allegedly making up for the lack of sponsorship money since the Reebok deal, now gone, thanks to Isaac Dolgarian. Everyone's going to be keeping a close eye on it. So, do I give it to him? I give it to him for just fighting so badly. All the other stuff's alleged, but he fought terribly in that fight, and I don't understand just shooting and going to your knees and then not fighting the hands. But it's a close thing, because I want to give it to Jailton Almeida, because he's still not learned that you need to throw some fucking strikes from top position. But equally, it was just because the judges wanted to send him a message, just because they felt like it. Any other night, he probably gets that decision. And we all groan, and he moves up the division. Anyway, that was 2025. I thought lots of fun stuff happened. We got a slow start to this year, nothing going on until the 26th, and even then, it's Justin Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett for the third title at lightweight at the moment. we got the real title, we got the BMF title, and we got this interim title. In fact, the upcoming BMF fight is more legitimate than this fight. So, yeah. But hopefully the start of good things in the year. And with a couple of weeks to go until that, it gives me time to talk about things I want to talk about. Like I said, I did the Duran piece a couple of weeks ago, which you should go and check out on the Patreon. And I've got some ideas for stuff I want to do until then. I'm your boy, Jack Slack. I hope you had a fantastic holiday. I know I did. And let's get back in the mud and oink like pigs as they deliver us our MMA slop. Ghost of James Krause, 2 years on. Bless.